In the bustling suburb of Bankstown, Sydney, residents of a 9-storey apartment complex face a crisis that's tearing the community apart.
You meet James, a resident whose life's been turned upside down when the building's 2 lifts broke over 6 months ago. One lift has been out for over half a year, and the second one followed almost a month later.
Yeah, James has said it's been a nightmare. He lives on the 8th floor, and every day is a challenge as he needs to go up and down the stairs.
The situation's hit everyone hard, but for some, like elderly Martha and wheelchair-bound Tom, it's more than just an inconvenience.
Martha lives on the 9th floor and had to temporarily move out of the property due to medical reasons, and Tom, who's in a wheelchair, had to move and is separated from his home and his wife.
With over 90 apartments in the building, you'd just assume that the repairs would be pretty swift, but despite collecting a whopping $3.6 million in strata fees, the residents were slapped with an additional $35,000 special levy.
What a load of crap.
Where's all this money going if it's not going to essential repairs like this? The conflict between the strata and the owners has escalated, leaving residents stuck in a cycle of blame and frustration.
And this is where it gets hard, as days turn into weeks, turn into months. What should just be a simple repair could take weeks to get in. They've said it could take up to 16 weeks just to find a time to repair the lifts.
What was once a dream for many has become a towering challenge.
And this isn't an uncommon story. We've had the mascot towers you've heard on the news lately, and as more and more Australians face the reality that buying your first home is going to be in an apartment, you need to be aware of some of the risks. So in today's video, we're going to take you through how to identify some situations like this to avoid you falling into a similar trap.
Alright, well let's start off with the first tip. If you are considering buying a body corporate, I know when I bought my first home, I went for a body corporate property or a strata property, depending where you're located. The affordability compared to a house for me was a big draw card, but there are some things you need to be aware of. The first is understanding the strata ownership. Recognize that owning a strata property involves both an individual ownership of your unit that you'll own and shared ownership of common areas in the property.
And this can be a blessing and a curse. If you own your own property, you got to worry about taking out the bins, you got to worry about the gardens, the upkeep, that sort of thing. With a strata property, a lot of that's taken care of. You've got someone, on some cases, that might actually live on site, take out your bins for you, worry about the garden, the maintenance, just the general upkeep of the exterior of the building. And it can be really handy. A lot of people actually prefer this type of living. With the high density, it also can mean you're in a more central location, which prevents having a car, and it helps you get that commute time down. But understanding the makeup of the ownership of your building is important. If you're in a building that's got lots of investors compared to a building that's got lots of owner-occupiers, they could have different goals to you. In Nathan's case, he was pretty lucky with his building. A lot of them were owner-occupiers. Everyone would get together once a year, talk about the building. You need maintenance, got to replace some lights, maybe put some security cameras in for the benefit of everyone in that corporation. On the other hand, if it's a building that's got heaps of investors, they're probably not even going to get into the strata meeting. So it's up to you to really push things forward.
All right, let's look at the second tip, which is reviewing strata plan and bylaws. By examining the strata plan to understand the boundaries, the elements of the property that you own and the common property, you also want to familiarize yourself with the bylaws which govern the rules of the strata community.
Now, a common one I see here is with pets. There are some buildings that might have specific bylaws around the size of your animals, the type of animals. There was a story in the AFR not long ago about a couple that had some iguanas and lizards, and the strata property actually said, well, we're fine with cats, we're fine with dogs, but we're not okay with lizards, and they weren't allowed to live in that building. This is where every building can be different. They can have their own individual bylaws for that specific building, which could impact you depending on your pets, your preferences, or even what you want to do with the property.
Yeah, even when I owned a unit, I had to be careful because in my bylaws, it actually said if I got an air conditioning unit, I couldn't have it sitting outside a certain part of the house that was facing the outside and things like that you need to be careful of there. Even the facade of the property, you can't go and change and enclose your balcony. If you've got a balcony, it's got to look out all the same in a lot of situations. So really understanding those bylaws, what you can and can't do if you've got common areas that you might share or things like that.
The last point on this is just think about your future purpose. There are some buildings that actually forbid having Airbnb and short-term rental. If you buy an apartment in intercity, that might be your ultimate plan. You might buy it to live in for the short term, then you might turn to an Airbnb, an investment. So check out what you can do up front because this could limit your plans in the future.
All right, the third tip is assess the finances and levies of the body corporate. By investigating the health of the strata scheme, including the current levies, the sinking fund funds, as well as potential upcoming expenses, you might be liable for the property. You can really get a gauge of what's coming up and what they've done previously.
Yeah, so you can either get a strata report for someone to detail this, or you can go through the minutes of meetings and physically go through the records to work out what's going on. A fair while ago, I was looking at a unit in Sydney and I spent a bit of time investigating the minutes of meetings. I noticed that the sinking fund had a few $100,000 in there, which was a lot more than I expected anyway. And reading the minutes of meetings, I'd seen they'd been raising special levies to repaint and refresh the complete external of the building. They were going to update the gardens, they were going to get landscaping. It was a whole kit and caboodle. And that's why they had extra money. But taking time to understand what this means can also help. It can also be true the other way. If the sinking fund has very little funds and there's details in the minutes of meeting that says, well, there's issues with a lift, we have to raise a special levy, then that's when you need to be buyer beware and realize that once you're in that apartment, if they raise a special levy, it's up to you as the owner to put your money forward.
You also want to go back on the historic minutes of meetings to see what type of works they've done to the property, if they've been maintaining the property. As Jaden said, if they've got very little money and you look back on the minutes in the past and you see they've done a new roof, they've done the balconies, and they've probably done all the things you'd expect them to do, then you might go, oh, actually, that's not too bad because it looks like most things are up to date. Or if there's issues like, the concrete needed to be redone or major problems, you might go, actually, this isn't one for me. On the other hand, if they have heaps of money in the body corporate levy, you might go, actually, are they doing enough work to the property? So it's kind of that Goldilocks zone where you want them to have enough money, but not too much money, in a way that you want to see them doing the work to the property to keep it maintained.
It's not bad.
The fourth tip is to inspect the property thoroughly. Look through the repair history as we talked about, the maintenance schedule of the building to avoid any inherited, unresolved or costly issues. We saw this recently with a client who had a property they owned for a long period of time, and the property was built with this inferior concrete, sort of a concrete cancer they call it, where the property was falling apart. They actually had to sue the builder and get them to come in and repair it. It was an absolute debacle during this period. They were unable to sell the property. So you want to make sure you'll find those sort of things in the minutes of the meetings from the past, and seeing when they have those meetings, they're going to talk about the issues. So really thoroughly understand them. You want to work with like a solicitor here who can get those minutes from the meeting if you've requested them, understand them from a legal point of view, and make sure you know what you're getting into before you go ahead.
The last tip is understanding the insurance cover. Knowing what the Strata's insurance covers can protect you from additional risk. Now we see this a lot here in Brisbane, where floods are pretty frequent in some of the inner city areas like West End. Some banks will actually request to see the Strata insurance to make sure the building is protected in the case of a flood. We saw a few years ago where some buildings were flooded out, the car parks were closed, the buildings were actually emptied for a few months while they had to pump mud and silt out from the basements. So taking time to understand not just your apartment's insurance cover, but the whole strata, the whole complex's insurance cover, and if it's there to protect you and the other owners in the case something goes wrong. This is where you really need to put a due diligence clause or a subject to satisfactory body corporate or strata checks in your finance offer. It's going to give you time to investigate all these different matters to make sure you're going to be protected, because at the end of the day, once you're the owner, you're the one that's going to be on the hook.
We've got a big problem here.
And if you find value in this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as it really does help out the channel. And a big thank you to all our subscribers for your support. Inspires us to create more content. We hope you enjoy.
All right, so Nathan, so this sounds pretty scary. It might be turning some people off buying an apartment, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, an apartment is also a great way to get a stepping stone. It certainly was for you. It was a way to get in the market without having a too big a mortgage, or it's just a way to get in the market in a place that's accessible. Homes can have similar issues, so it's not all rosy on the other side of the fence. But if you're looking at buying an apartment, there are some extra steps you want to take to make sure you're protected. First step is putting a due diligence clause subject to satisfactory body corporate or strata check. This is going to protect you and give you time to investigate the minutes, the financial records, the insurances, and all the things we've covered in this video.
This is also where you want to talk with your mortgage broker and solicitor here. Make sure you're getting the right terms in the contract, and also check with your mortgage broker on any other conditions you need to put in the contract, such as a subject to finance clause or even a building and pest clause, because you want to ensure you have all the right clauses. Do keep in mind, in a more competitive environment, you might find that other people aren't putting these clauses in, and that's why you want to talk with your broker to make sure that you're making the right clauses that meet the market expectations. Or whether you might talk to them and they say, like, if you don't include these clauses, we'll get you out in your finance, or other clauses that can protect you.
The second tip here is really lean on your solicitor to review the contracts and the minutes if you need help with that. A solicitor is going to be more familiar with the intricacies of the contract and any appendices that are attached to that. In New South Wales, they'll generally help you review the strata reports and the minutes of meetings to help you make the right decision on this particular building. As Nathan also said, a building and pest inspector can help physically inspect the building. And if there's things the strata hasn't picked up, your building and pest inspector can potentially check that out for you.
Yeah, I highly recommend this one here, getting the building and pest. I remember when I put an offer on a property before, It was a unit complex. I looked at the property, it looked like there was no issues with it. And fortunately, the building and pest inspectors found out that the foundations were sinking. I didn't even think there was any information in the body corporate about this. So once again, getting the building and pest inspection along with checking the minutes of the meeting will make sure you're being really thorough in understanding what you're getting before you commit to anything. And once again, as we talked about that finance clause, to make sure that you do get your loan through before you commit to anything. The last one to keep in mind is that you want to make sure when you buy a property, Jade mentioned it earlier, that you get the balance between occupants and investors, right? You want to prefer a building with a higher rate of owner occupiers to investors, as owner occupiers tend to maintain properties better.
I think it also comes back to their goals. As an investor, you're probably going to be less concerned about the general upkeep, how the apartment looks. They're just thinking about their return. But if it's your home, you're probably going to have a different perspective. You're going to care if the garden looks scrappy. You're going to care if the paint's flaking off. And it's going to change how those body corporate and strata meetings are run. The best way to check this out is on realestate.com.au. You can look at the current units that are rented in that building, and you can try and work out what the proportion of ownership is with owner occupied compared to investor.
And guys, here at Hunter Galloway, we're a mortgage broker and specialize with people buying apartments. So if you're needing assistance with understanding your finances, how buying an apartment can affect your borrowing power, because there are certain things that can have an impact on your assessment when it comes to buying an apartment, get in touch. Call us directly on 1300 088 065 or visit our website huntergalloway.com.au. Guys, until next time, we'll see you then.